All right, what's going on, guys? Simple Sports here, and Week 3 is in the books in the NFL, and so I want to go over a couple of things. We got another podcast coming, Shot Team podcast coming soon, going over a lot of this stuff and more in a lot more detail within the next day or two that'll be releasing. But this is my standalone Simple Sports podcast, and I want to talk about a couple of things really quickly over the last couple of weeks that have stood out to me. Listen, obviously with 32 teams and, the NFL being as team-oriented as it is, there are always a ton of different storylines and reasons to teams losing and winning games and injuries and all that good stuff plays into it. And so I want to go through a couple of things so far this year that I'm really impressed with. A couple of things that I really enjoyed seeing so far, some things that stood out to me, some things that were good, some things that were bad, and everything in between. So let's get started. First up on the list is Pat Mahomes. I said before last season, before the season started last year, the Chiefs should start this kid. Now, I understood why they didn't, considering they had a veteran, proven veteran in Alex Smith, been to a couple of playoff games. Obviously a fairly competent quarterback, pretty good, not great, good. And, I just think his ceiling wasn't what the Chiefs needed in order to take the next step. I've always thought that they were a good team. I thought they lacked quarterback play, and defensively they struggled a little bit, but I think some of that could have been fixed by having better quarterback play last year. Now this year, their defense is atrocious and their quarterback play is better. So obviously that didn't go hand in hand like I kind of thought it would. And some of that has to do with the lack of personnel that they have now and things like that, people that were lost and gained over the course of the last year. But nonetheless, I thought last year they should have started him right away. Alex Smith, like I said, thanks, but no thanks. Listen, he's a great locker room guy. He's a great quarterback. He's obviously a starting quarterback. That's not my concern with him. For me, it's not that he's a bad quarterback at all. It's just his ceiling is significantly lower than Pat Mahomes' ceiling, in my opinion. And so, granted, it probably wouldn't have gone this well, obviously, if he had started last year, considering he was a complete rookie, had no idea what the NFL was like. So being able to sit behind Alex Smith for a while certainly has done him some favors. I just think he would have been good starting last year. Again, would have gotten off to this pace? No. And this pace won't continue, as we all know. He's going to regress. Even if he continues this throughout the entire year where he's just on this blazing path, right? That's just not sustainable over the course of a career. If it is, then you might as well go ahead and give him a gold jacket now and call him the GOAT, because obviously his numbers are astounding to this point. But again, we don't expect that to continue, certainly not for his career. I doubt it continues even for the year. I'm sure there's going to be a correction coming soon, but so far it's been nothing but spectacular. And, so far he's escaped throwing in no interceptions. Some of that is on the defense simply not making the plays that were there to be made. And so let's not overlook that. I'm not saying he's perfect, but for, essentially a rookie, I think he is the best quarterback in the league that is, 3 to 4 years and younger. I couldn't think of one that I'd rather have than Pat Mahomes. I said that before the draft last year. I said that before the season last year. I said that before the season this year. So no hindsight here. I've always been impressed with him. He obviously has weapons on the team. No question about that. That's certainly helpful. But for me, I've been impressed with his read and react ability and his decision making for such a young player. The arm talent was already known, but he's calm in the pocket. He's confident as well in the pocket, and he's confident in his play as well. And you could tell he knows he's good, but it's a soft, wanted arrogance, which is totally different from a very braggadocious guy or a very, very braggadocious player. But he's calm and confident in the pocket. His eyes are always upfield, always looking to throw forward, and he can run, for a couple yards when he needs to. But he's not looking to run the football. What really impresses me above probably everything is his location. With the placement of the throws that he makes. He puts the ball where it needs to be pretty much every time. low and high and back shoulder. He made a couple of throws at Kelsey in the Steelers game, or excuse me, in the 49ers game to keep him out of danger. He throw backside so to slow his progress down so he doesn't get blasted. He can hit the pylon on the end zone throws. He can throw short. He can throw deep. He can throw intermediate. Between the numbers. He can throw outside the numbers. He can throw it 60 yards on a rope. Whatever you need him to do, he can do it. And as I said, I think he's the best quarterback in the league that's within 3 to 4 years of being in the NFL. Obviously, we got a couple of vets that you would take over him. But for a young guy, I think he is 1A and 1B. All right, so there's one team that is in a lot of trouble long-term. Short-term, long-term, they're in trouble, period. And that's the Dallas Cowboys. Okay, they have a long laundry list of problems, all right? One of which is what a lot of people thought was the best offensive line in football doesn't look like the best offensive line in football. Some of that due to injury. I'm not really sure what the rest of it is. I know Travis Frederick has been out, and a couple other guys have been missing or will miss games or have missed games already, I should say. So the offensive line is not jumping off like they have in the last 2 or 3 years in terms of running the football. Couple that with the fact that Zeke hasn't been getting the number of carries he should be getting, considering how special he is and how poor Dak is and the rest of the offense. And all of that is compounded with the fact that they don't have a single playmaker on the outside or at tight end. Not to mention their quarterback is not very good at throwing the football when it's all said and done. He's accurate. Certainly in the short area passing. He did miss a couple of throws, but everyone missed some, so I'm not overly concerned with that. What does concern me is, he doesn't push the ball down the field at all. He became the fifth quarterback in NFL history with less than 200 passing yards while attempting 25 plus passes in 5 straight games. So let me say that one more time. That's a mouthful. 200 passing yards, or less than 200 passing yards, while attempting 25 or more passes, 5 consecutive games, 9 of the last 11 under 200 passing yards. That's atrocious. For the second time in the last 3 weeks, Cowboys didn't find the end zone until the fourth quarter. Dak doesn't throw the ball down the field well, like I said, but he also doesn't throw the ball down the field, period. He doesn't take some chances, and largely that's because of the lack of weapons that he has, but what that entails is he now has to march down the field on these 10, 12, 15, 16 play drives, and that's just not his strong suit, okay? As we also saw on Sunday against the Seahawks, the defense isn't dominant enough to carry the team, and eventually their defense is going to break. Some of that has to do with them being on the field so much, but also, again, their defense isn't dominant like some other teams that we see. And when the defense does break, the offense is not good enough to recover from it. And so that's the struggle that we've seen them have. And one of the key things for me, from a quarterback standpoint with Dak Prescott, is the team is second worst in the league on third down. That's just not going to get it done. With your defense not being as dominant as it needs to be, your passing game not being what it needs to be, you can ill afford to give the other team the football. And when you're not converting on third down, you're giving them the football back to the opposition to go against a defense, while good, is not dominant. And again, when you couple that with the fact that they can't move the football offensively, they look pretty anemic, it makes for a bad team. And the Cowboys right now are a bad team, and most NFL teams mid-season don't get it fixed. It's just not that easy to come across upgradable talent like you do in other sports like the NBA. You can get an NBA player at the trade deadline and go from out of the playoffs to championship contenders, hypothetically, obviously, but you could do that in 1 year. In football, it doesn't work that way. Unless it's a quarterback that's all time or that's really, really good, you don't see that happen, and you certainly don't see it in the middle of the season. And so I don't expect the Cowboys to get much better. In fact, I don't think they're going to win more than 6 games over the course of the year. I really think 6 games for them is going to be a stretch, and that's without even looking at the schedule. But they're not a good team at all, and it really starts with Dak Prescott. or the lack of production that he's given, and the lack of carries for Ezekiel Elliott. So over up in Pittsburgh, the Steelers got a lot going on as well. The Bell situation is the obvious one, and it's only made worse over the course of the season so far, and even in the offseason with all the negative comments from the locker room, whether it was Big Ben or the linemen saying things, the coach saying we got James Conner and all that stuff. It's just a big mess. And my gut says that even if the Steelers can make this year a successful one, whether Bell comes back next week or not until week 10, as most think, he's certainly not coming back next year. And with each day going by and as piss poor as the Steelers look, I'm leaning closer to him never even running the ball for them again. I think no later than the trade deadline he'll be out of there. I think it's going to come sooner than that, but I think before the trade deadline he is going to be in another uniform. I don't know where. We've heard some names in the mix. I know the Browns are interested, the Jets, the Colts, Niners, and Texans. I'm sure there are other teams as well. Those are the only teams that I've heard about myself. From Bell's perspective, honestly, I think the only team that makes sense for him this year would be the Colts or the 49ers. And the 49ers, really for next year, that would have been if Jimmy G hadn't torn his ACL. But since he did, I just think that would be a wash for Bell's sake, certainly for this year. But hypothetically, if Jimmy G were healthy, I think he could benefit from having a guy like Bell because he doesn't have a lot of weapons on the outside. And obviously that could still work for next year. I'm just saying for this year, I thought they could have, they might have been able to sneak into the playoffs or certainly been a lot more competitive in that aspect had they had Le'Veon Bell. But Jimmy G just went down. So, that's kind of a moot point today. But the Colts, for now, I think would be the best option for Bell. Andrew Luck needs help. He's not fully healthy, and I don't think he'll ever get back to where he was. We got about 80 to 85% of what he used to be. And, he's still a good quarterback, no question. But you can release some of the pressure on him by getting him a quality back like Le'Veon Bell and potentially be off and running with the AFC and the AFC South, particularly looking the way that it does. Same story for the 49ers, obviously for next year, as I said. I think the Browns would be a good fit. The Texans and the Jets. I think all 5 teams would be a good fit. The reason I picked the Colts and the Niners over the other 3 is because we know to some degree what their quarterback situation is like, with the exception of the 49ers. Although we have a little bit more on them, but Jimmy G really hasn't played for 6 years. And he's only got a couple of starts on his belt, and he's already hurt again. So I really don't even know about the 49ers. The Colts have the only established quarterback, and while he is coming back off a significant injury and missed 2 years basically on his own, he is certainly a lot better to this point than the other 3 quarterbacks, or the other 4 that I mentioned with the other teams that I mentioned. And like I said, I think they could potentially make some noise if they were able to acquire Le'Veon Bell. The defense is not terrible. The offense isn't terrible. It's just Luck needs some help with running the football and protection, and having a back like Bell could alleviate both of those without necessarily having to fix the offensive line, at least not right away, because you just can't in the middle of the season. So I think the Colts would be a good option. I don't think it's off the board completely that they move on from Big Ben next year, and that might be a bit of a hot take. Next year, probably unlikely, but soon, within the next 2 years, I don't think it's necessarily off the board. The Steelers aren't very good, and Big Ben, while he is putting up good numbers, hasn't played all that well, in my opinion. I think the team altogether is on the verge of an implosion. We've seen a lot of talk about the Patriots, and is their dynasty over, and the Eagles, can they repeat, and the Vikings, did they miss their window, and so forth and so on. I think the Steelers have really screwed this up over the last 3 to 5 years, and I think their window has officially closed. In fact, I don't think they're going to make the playoffs this year. I don't think they're going to be very good at all. They lucked up, I think, and beat the Bucks because Ryan Fitzpatrick really wet the bed early in that game, and it gave the Steelers a chance to pull out in front. They're just not very good. Antonio Brown has been productive, but through 3 games, Juju Smith-Schuster has been the best receiver on the team. He's got 27 catches, almost 400 receiving yards, and in the last 3 games straight, 4 dating back to last season, has over 100 yards in each game. So they got the weapons. Obviously, if Bell was there, they had even more weapons, but it's just the chemistry and the environment and the culture matters, okay? And you can't go but so far off the rails before you can't get it back. And I think they have gone over the edge, and it ain't coming back. I think they missed their window. They're going to put up points all year. They're going to win 8 to 9 games, but I don't think they're going to make the playoffs. I really don't. Big Ben is getting old. He can still make plays. We saw him make a couple of plays, some clutch plays last night even. But he makes a lot more of the bad ones than he used to. He makes a lot more poor decisions than he used to. And he clearly misses and needs Le'Veon Bell. But like I said, I think that ship has sailed. And the league around the Steelers is really changing, like on the fly. Every good team right now has 3 things in common. They have a good young quarterback. They have a good young defense. And they have a good young offensive-minded coach with an experienced, proven veteran defensive coordinator who can sort of take over the reins on the defense. And the Steelers don't have any of those things. They don't have a pass rusher, which would probably be 4th on that list. They don't have a ball hawk in the secondary, which would probably be 5th on that list. They don't have the top 5 things that you need. The offensive line isn't that good. They don't have the top 6 fundamental things that you need in today's NFL to win a championship. And so for that reason, I am out on the Pittsburgh Steelers. Finally, for today's episode, I want to talk about who is the MVP so far. Obviously this is a fluid situation along with a lot of things that I talk about today, but so far I got 3 candidates, okay? Now, the 3 changed literally Sunday, but 2 of them have remained the same. I took Drew Brees out with the loss solely because of the record. And in that very first game, while Drew Brees himself has played excellent, he's in my 4th spot right now, so he still could get to the top 3. But just with the loss and the other 2 having not lost, I just had to take him out. So with that said, in my first position, I got Pat Mahomes. I spoke enough about him in the beginning of this episode. It's hard to argue against him in the first spot, really, with his numbers being what they are. I don't care who you are. It's difficult. It's practically impossible to say so far through 3 games he's not the MVP. 67% completion percentage for almost 1,000 yards, 13 touchdowns, and 0 interceptions, which we obviously know he won't continue on that pace necessarily, especially with the touchdown to interception ratio. But again, I mean, I don't know how you argue with that as the MVP through 3 games. Number 2, I got Jared Goff. Best team in football, I believe. Only reason he's not number 1 is because of the sheer discrepancy in his numbers and Patrick Mahomes. I think that the Rams are a better team overall, and thus I would probably give the nod to Jared Goff, if he had better numbers, specifically just more touchdowns. He's super efficient, 70% completion percentage, but just not as many touchdowns, and he has thrown a couple of picks. So you couple that with the fact that he actually has the defense on his side, unlike Patrick Mahomes, and again, with the numbers not being as impressive as Mahomes, I got to put him at 2. And then number 3, I got Khalil Mack. I don't know when the last time a defensive player got close to winning an MVP, much less winning an MVP. I don't even know if a defensive player has won an MVP besides Lawrence Taylor. So I think he should. I got him in the 3rd spot. His numbers, if you look at his actual numbers, okay, and they are impressive, okay, but they aren't as crazy as this and as idiotic as this might sound. They aren't as impressive as they probably should be, right? So he's got a pick, he's got a touchdown, he's got 3 forced fumbles. Those things are obviously impressive. I guess the two numbers I'm talking about are the sacks and the tackles. Now, he has 4 sacks, which through 3, I mean, again, even if he gets a sack per game, that's 16 sacks on the season. That's still a lot. So I fully expect his sack number to be somewhere around 20. He's only got 11 tackles, which, again, when you see guys getting 5, 6, 7 in a quarter, finishing the game with 12 to 15, that's, again, the 11 isn't as impressive. But you also have to take into account the position he plays, which is being in an edge rusher. A lot of the flow goes between the tackles or opposite you because they want to run, they want to avoid going to the end. So I'm not as concerned with the amount of tackles, the sacks. It's just incredible. If you look at him on tape, you would think his numbers would be higher, I guess is what I'm trying to say. He was dominant in Oakland. We already knew that. And so it's no surprise that he is dominating in Chicago. I will say, however, that I didn't see this coming. And we'll see how much of this he can keep up throughout the year, because it is, again, you watch the tape, he is wrecking teams single-handedly. And we haven't seen a defensive player do this since Lawrence Taylor. He's got a quarterback who is not very good in Mitchell Trubisky. And, we can table that discussion for a later date. But they're 2-1, and it's all or mostly thanks to the Bears defense, and mostly that is because of Khalil Mack. Like I said, a pick, a touchdown, 3 forced fumbles, a sack, and 11 tackles. Again, like I said, there's more guys that have sacks and tackles, that have more sacks and more tackles than Mack. But if you're actually watching the game and you watch the film, his impact is far greater than his numbers may suggest. And as good as his numbers are, that just is the reality. So I got him at the 3rd spot behind Patrick Mahomes and Jared Goff, 1 spot in front of Drew Brees. I'm not sure who that 4th or that 5th spot would go to, just because after that you can probably put a number of people there. And if Pat Mahomes and Goff had lost a couple of games, a game or two, if they had lost a game or two, they wouldn't even be at the top 3. But if Mahomes and Goff had lost a game, I might even put Mack in the 1st spot, just because, again, his impact on the game is incredible. It is, through 3 games, it has been as impactful as a quarterback. And so he's got to be in there. And those are the 3 that I got. All right, so that's all we got for now. Like I said, Shot Team will come out with another episode. We're going to go over some of this stuff with the rest of the guys as well, but we got some more stuff planned for you all as well, so stay tuned for that. Until the next time, I will see you. Peace. We did a tablet of acid today. Lit joints with the matches and ashes away. We dash away. Donna and Dixon, the pistol is blasted.